In the annals of world history, the story of Cleopatra VII stands among the most fascinating tales ever told. Admired for her divine beauty and her unconquerable intelligence, as well as famous for her relationships with the Roman generals Mark Antony and Julius Caesar, the name Cleopatra is forever written into the fabric of the human narrative. Though at the age of 39, she took her own life, and today we'll find out why. Cleopatra VII Philopator was born sometime between 69 BC and 68 BC, a long time after Alexander the Great took control of Egypt in 332 BC. Following Alexander's death, one of his generals, Ptolemy I, would come to rule over Egypt. Ptolemy had been a great friend of the Macedonian ruler Alexander, and when Egypt became part of his empire, Ptolemy became pharaoh. But let's fast forward a bit. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, died in 51 BC, and after that, Cleopatra, along with her 10-year-old brother Ptolemy XIII, became the rulers of Egypt. The two were married, a tradition back then that was unavoidable. As the story goes though, Cleopatra fled to Syria in 49 BC after her brother's advisors plotted against her. It's said there she got together an army of mercenaries and did her own plotting to return to Egypt and take back power. At around this time, the Roman general Pompey was in a battle with the Roman leader Gaius Julius Caesar. Pompey was defeated in the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC and then fled to Egypt. Things didn't go well there for him as Ptolemy gave the order to assassinate him. Caesar then went over to the Egyptian capital Alexandria, with Ptolemy believing that he had done a good deed by killing Caesar's rival. Perhaps myth, perhaps the truth, but the story goes that Cleopatra sneaked into the quarters of Caesar and asked him for his help to defeat her brother. She must have said something right because the war between Caesar's Roman forces and Ptolemy's forces ensued. The latter lost and he had to flee the city, and it's believed Ptolemy ended up drowning in the Nile River. After this, Caesar restored the throne to Cleopatra, and she took it with her younger brother Ptolemy XIV, who was then 13. Cleopatra then bore Caesar a child, but he never publicly admitted it was his. This child would be named Caesarion, sometimes called Little Caesar. Cleopatra followed Caesar to Rome, where, as you probably know, he was assassinated, being stabbed 23 times by a group of Roman senators. Cleopatra didn't hang around Rome after that, and she returned to Egypt. Ptolemy XIV died young, and the circumstances were said to be mysterious. So now we have Cleopatra as ruler with her son Caesarion as co-regent. He became Ptolemy XV, and to strengthen her position as leader, Cleopatra began to identify herself with the goddess Isis. Royalty in Egypt and all over the world have claimed links to the divine as it gives them more power and a stronger claim to their thrones. It seemed that Cleopatra now had a firm hold on her position as ruler. But things were never easy for Cleopatra. Her people were hit hard when flooding of the Nile led to the destruction of crops. What followed were rising prices and a lot of hungry people. Meanwhile in Rome, three men allied to the great, now dead Caesar, Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, were busy butting heads with the people that plotted to kill him. Both sides wanted the help of Cleopatra, and she made the decision to send 4 Roman legions that had previously been taken to Egypt by Caesar to go to Rome and support the three men, often referred to as the Second Triumvirate. The combined forces defeated those who had plotted against Caesar at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. Mark Antony and Octavian then divided power. Antony invited Cleopatra to the Sicilian city of Tarsus, and as the story goes, she sailed into the city on a beautiful ship. Antony was to welcome Cleopatra with open arms because of the role she had played in helping him. It said she sailed while dressed in the robes of the goddess Isis. Like Caesar, Antony saw the mesmerizing lady and soon fell in love with her. He pledged his support to her and also said he'd help her defeat her rivals. One of those rivals was her exiled sister, Arsinoe. In fact, Antony was so seduced by the charms of Cleopatra that he ended up leaving his wife and kids in Rome and sailed for Egypt. At the same time, Antony was having a dispute with Octavian over who would have the most power in Rome. After the Battle of Philippi, the two had virtually split the Roman Republic between them, with the third part of the triumvirate, Lepidus, seemingly getting the short end of the stick. Meanwhile, Antony was enjoying his time with Cleopatra. The two spent the winter of 41 to 40 BC in Alexandria, and there they got busy. During this time, Antony gave back some Roman territories to Cleopatra, and in return she pledged to provide him with 200 ships for his campaign against the Parthian Empire. Antony left to fight his battles, and then the two would not see each other for a few years, but they managed to stay connected in their own ways. It's said she had spies based in his camp, and they also wrote to each other with some regularity. Cleopatra had 2 children, one boy named Alexander Helios and a girl named Cleopatra Selene II. both of whom Antony said were his. The boy was named after the sun and the girl the moon, which was symbolic of Cleopatra's power. Even though Antony had left his wife Fulvia along with his kids for the arms of Cleopatra, she was determined to get him back. Some claim she started a war with his arch-enemy Octavian, which came to be known as the Parisine War. Other historians say the war would have started regardless, and it had nothing to do with her impressing her husband. His wife and her armies didn't fare well, and she ended up exiled. Tragically, it's said she died on the way to try and meet up with her estranged husband again. Things then turned a bit sour for Antony, with some of his key allies changing their allegiance to Octavian, and Antony forced to make up with Octavian. To do that, he married Octavian's half-sister Octavia. This wasn't about love, but mere diplomacy. Over in Egypt, though, life under Cleopatra was booming. The people were happy and she had a firm hold on her power. Antony needed her help again in his fight against the kingdom of Parthia, and in return, he awarded her and her children some territories, ones the Romans had taken from Egypt. These included bits of Syria, Lebanon and Cyprus, Crete and what's called Libya today. When the two met again, Antony got to see his kids for the first time. They discussed her conflict with a man called Herod and his campaigns. Their love reignited, and with her new territories, Cleopatra had never been stronger. But over in Rome, Octavian was stirring up trouble. Why, he asked, is this foreign queen being given so much power? This nettled the public as well as those in charge. Octavian was sly and told other people that Antony had forsaken his good wife and fallen into the arms of another. He then made a shrewd move and gave Antony's deceased wife a lot of respect, including having statues built of her. Cleopatra, meanwhile, was traveling with Antony while he and his army were on their way to do battle with the Parthian Empire. On the way, she became pregnant again, and later had to return home to Egypt to have the child. The boy would be named Ptolemy Philadelphus. Antony's Parthian campaign, meanwhile, didn't go well at all, and he lost many thousands of troops and then retreated to modern-day Beirut in Lebanon. There, he and his remaining troops waited for Cleopatra and her troops to come and help them. She arrived, and he decided that rather than return to Rome with his head down and face his many enemies there, he would instead go to Alexandria with his beloved Cleopatra. There, he got himself ready again to return to battle with the Parthian Empire. And even Octavian sent him some troops from Rome to help him. It was rumored, though, that Octavian had only done this to embarrass Antony, using it as a sign of one-upsmanship. Octavian now was very powerful, and he managed to convince the people of Rome and all those with power that Antony was going to join up with Cleopatra and leave Rome for good and start a new capital in Egypt. It wasn't long until the Roman Senate took away all of Antony's titles. It was now just Antony and Cleopatra together, and in 32 BC, Octavian declared war against Cleopatra. This didn't go well for her, and in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium, Antony and Cleopatra's forces were easily beaten by Octavian's armies. Both fled to Egypt, but there the couple parted ways. Antony went off to try and raise more troops, and Cleopatra went to Alexandria. Soon after, Octavian decided it was time to invade Egypt. He was helped by Herod, but Antony also turned up in Alexandria and won one small battle with Octavian's troops at the city's hippodrome. What happened next sounds quite brutal, and we may never know exactly how it happened. It's said that Antony was eventually defeated and held captive by Octavian, while Cleopatra locked herself in a tomb with her closest allies and comrades. There, she sent a message to Antony saying that she had committed suicide. Her plan was to burn herself along with all her treasure. She didn't actually do this, though. Antony read the message, and he either fell on his sword to take his own life or perhaps just stabbed himself in the stomach with a knife. According to the historian Plutarch, Antony didn't immediately die and was taken to that tomb and to his beloved Cleopatra, where he died in her arms at the age of 53. Cleopatra was then captured by Octavian's forces before she had the opportunity to follow in Mark Antony's footsteps, but she was at least allowed to embalm Antony and bury him in her tomb before being taken into captivity. Cleopatra was then held captive by Octavian, and it said she told him to his face that she would not be walked around with him and forced to look at how triumphant he had been. He decided not to kill her, and she found out from a spy that Octavian was indeed planning to take her and her kids to Rome so she could be paraded through the streets as the great queen that he had defeated. It was then that she decided enough is enough. I won't let that happen. And in August of 30 BC, she did in fact take her own life in her palace with her servants doing the same. Popular story suggests that she allowed a highly venomous snake like an asp to bite her, but it's more likely that she did it herself using a sharp pin covered in poison. Octavian wasn't happy, of course, having lost his chance to march a captured queen through the streets of Rome, but he did at least allow her to be buried with her former lover Antony. And so ends the life of a great woman. So great, in fact, that her story became an enduring real-life myth that has lasted 2,000 years right to today. What do you think about this tragic love story? Tell us in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video, Why Life During the Dark Ages Sucked. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.